I will try to speak slowly, and you can also follow the subtitles. So the first thing that and this is going to be very important for my presentation, is you can see, of course, I am wearing the professor hat from UC Davis, but I'm actually also wearing another hat. I have another life. I also am the founder of Spectral Analytics, a startup company, and I think this is part of what I'm talking about when I want to talk with you today about innovative technologies, when I talk about capacity building, what the future is going to look like for universities, because I think a big part of what universities and academic institutions like BAAFS, what we're going to look for in the 21st century is much more technology driven. It's much more about entrepreneurship. It's much more about not just doing the research, not just publishing the papers, but actually getting solutions out there and providing a framework that these fine young people that we have here, the people that come to these institutions, that they get an education that allows them to go out and change the world to something better. So it's very important that we as professors also embrace this, that we talk about it. In our research we do it, but maybe also we go as far as start our own companies. I think that's very important. One question that I think we who are the researchers and also the people who are in administration, a key question we have to ask ourselves is how to remain relevant in the 21st century. I think the internet offers so much to the young people nowadays. Why go to university? You can just get everything online. How can we be relevant? And I think that's something we have to really, really think about, because otherwise we are running out, we're not taking advantage of these higher research institutions as places where we can offer something that is valuable to the students. So what I really think we need to focus on is we need to make sure that in the activities that we offer, we give our students discussion skills. We give them problem-solving skills. We give them the opportunity to deal with adversity, having to run their own projects, not just dictating to them what to do, but actually give them the opportunities to solve problems themselves. Learn and do. Take what they learn in the classroom and turn it into something that is actionable, something that leads to something. It is not just about delivering information to students. That kind of teaching is in the past. It shouldn't be like this anymore. Because you can download everything from the internet. You can sit down and learn and memorize and read. We don't need to, in the classroom, be doing that anymore. We can discuss it, but the students have so much access to this information now that that's not the main goal. It's just to deliver information. We need to embrace multidisciplinary collaboration. We have institutes, we have departments, different institutions, just like BAAFS. They're all divided into units, but those units need to be flexible. There needs to be ways that we can collaborate across those boundaries so that students can tailor their own experience so that they can get customized experiences that will allow them to apply for very, very different jobs. Because the world is complex. So why are we not also teaching them in a complex environment? Why are we not also offering them an education that is complex? Teaching them not only discussion skills, but communication, both reading and writing, taking advantage of the most modern technologies when it comes to communication. So graphics and audiovisual tools, all of this needs to be something they're exposed to. So when they go out and look for jobs, they can look smart, they can look professional, they can provide slides, they can provide communication and presentations that will dazzle, that will have impact. Whether they are talking to growers, politicians, consumers, kids, it doesn't matter who the target audience is, but they need to, and this needs to be built into how we educate. They need to be given these opportunities to learn this. And we definitely need to maximize what I call maximize societal connections. So this is making it relevant, making our what we talk about in the classroom or in the lab sessions, we need to connect it with the big issues, the real issues that society faces, okay? And empower them to self-belief. I think that's probably the biggest one, is we need to give them hope. We need to give them the belief that they can go out and they can change the world. We need to give them the power and the belief that they can go out and they can make a lot of money. They can be influential. Because that's why they would then be coming. Otherwise, we're making ourselves irrelevant in the 21st century. So it's very, very important that we think of these ways as we look forward, as the administrators look at how courses and institutes and teaching and everything needs to be tailored. These are the kinds of conversations that I'm hoping to have wherever I am. I want to be part of conversations about this because I think this is very, very important. And what should be the deliverables? Well, we know that traditionally it's research papers and scientific presentations, and that will continue to be important. But we need to go beyond that, okay? Of course, if you're into crop breeding or livestock breeding or something, you're also developing genetic material. So here, I hear that the Xigua, that you are very famous for, most of the watermelon sold here in China or in this part of China comes from here. That's a huge deal. That's a big thing. But we can go much further than that. Much further than that, okay? I'm sure there are lots of patents here, but what we need to do is also think about social media. We need to embrace that and see if we can turn plant protection into some social media platforms, something that can engage with people, that can engage with young people, engage with audiences that we typically don't meet. Can we make BAAFS relevant to audiences that normally wouldn't have maybe never heard of us? Right? Very, very important. Maybe we need people from education to join here, to help develop this. Website developers. There could be all sorts of things going on where the impact of what is being done here could be delivered in completely different ways and reach people that would make huge impact and make the government very, very happy. Make the city of Beijing very, very happy. Because the money that they're putting into this institution would then be used in a very, very clever way. We can definitely, and there is some in the Digital Agriculture Institute, there's something going on with prototypes of technologies, but we can go much further than that. That's something that needs to be investigated. Many more institutes should be embracing this, that the students not just write their papers and then they graduate, but there should be something physical. We can 3D print, we can use AI, we can do all sorts of things that could develop solutions so people could also walk away and go to competitions and maybe go to companies, and it could lead to prototypes that could be licensed through BAAFS. Entrepreneurship, industry partnerships, get them involved. Maybe have them on as, there could be different competitions where there would be, where companies could be coming here and seeing the products that the students are developing and afterwards hire them. Okay? And for that, the industries would then pay a lot of money because they would be able to select the best students. So in order to be at the competition, they would have to pay. Well, that gives money to this institute. Now suddenly things start moving, okay? Now you're creating something that is sustainable, something that has relevance, and you're really demonstrating that this institute belongs and it has a future. And if some parents or some kids learn about these competitions, they would want to come here because that's the way to get the good jobs. So there are so many ways that this could be used in a powerful way. So, I really want to. I want to say that I think that university-driven or higher education activities need to be driven from solutions, So we need to look at what society wants us to deliver solutions to. And for that, I always return to my favorite, which is Lego, because Hvor skjød Danmark. And Lego is from Denmark, right? The most famous toy in the world, right? And Lego is a beautiful symbol, is a beautiful analog of what education, what life is really all about. I will argue that life, a relationship, and education is about acquiring Lego blocks. The more Lego blocks you have, the more colors, shapes, and sizes you have, the bigger and more complex things you can build. So can we offer the students of tomorrow some Lego blocks? And can we do that through basic education, of course, but creating environments of active learning, using artificial intelligence, getting technologies as embedded and integrated into our courses? Can we work with industry partners and entrepreneurship? Can we get all of that mixed into whatever we are teaching? Then we can provide them with skill sets that will then make them very, very competitive for jobs and put them in a position to actually change the world to something better. So those are so focusing on solution areas. I'm going to be talking about 2 solution areas. So now I'm done talking about sort of the context of why I'm here and why I'm so passionate about education and the relevance of higher education institutions in the future. Now I want to talk a little bit about science. And I'm going to talk about 2 areas with you today. I'm going to talk about something called plasma activated water. And I'm also going to talk about satellite-based optical sensing, so how we can use satellite imaging and optical sensing more broadly in crop protection, but also in many other areas. So let's start with the plasma-activated water. You may be hearing me say PAW, and that is when I refer to plasma-activated water, PAW. Okay? So but before we go there, I just want to show you, this is an actual factory that produces fertilizer, okay? Because there's a relationship between PAW, plasma activated water, and fertilizer. This is how today's world is generating its nitrogen fertilizer. And we know from what is going on at the Hormuz Strait right now, is once the superpowers of the world stop bombing one another, what happens? Fertilizer is shut off. We no longer have the fertilizer. And that was one of the first consequences of the war between Israel, US, and Iran, was that there was no longer fertilizer available, right? And the process itself is extremely polluting, and it's based on an enormous amount of fertilizer, okay? Fossil fuel, my apologies, right? But this centralized production, this national security aspect, is something that I think is very, very important to realize. So let's flip that around. What if growers could produce their own nitrogen fertilizer? What if they didn't have to depend on these monstrous factories? What if they could do it all by themselves? How cool would that be? And where would that nitrogen come from? Well, here's the irony. The air is 78% nitrogen, right? So we're looking for nitrogen, we desperately need nitrogen fertilizer, yet it's all around us. I did a little experiment. I asked ChatGPT a little bit about the amount of fertilizer there is in the atmosphere. And first we should state that on an annual basis, crop production uses about 100 million metric tons of nitrogen fertilizer. So that sounds like a very, very big number. But here's the irony. The atmosphere, if we took all the nitrogen in the atmosphere, there would be 4,000 trillion metric tons. So if we just, for the heck of it, just for fun, there would actually be, we could actually use, if we used all the nitrogen in the atmosphere, we would actually have nitrogen fertilization at this level for 38 billion years. Meaning we have so much nitrogen in the atmosphere that even if we use just a fraction of it, we would have a lot. It wouldn't make much of a difference, right? So we have a lot of potential using what is in the atmosphere. This is a huge potential, and it's right here. Then we don't have to get it through the Hormuz Strait or get it from somewhere. That would be wonderful. So what is plasma activated water? Well, Professor D has been in my lab for 1 year and has seen this. So we have in my lab, so I'm in the entomology department, but we have a cold plasma system, probably the only entomology lab in the world that has one. So what you can see here is a jet, and right here there's a very high electric charge being developed. And that energy is reacting with the atoms, with the molecules in the air. And it's breaking those bonds that are between O2 and N2 and CO2 and the other components in the air. So N and N, two N atoms that have 3 covalent bonds, they are now being broken. And N is so reactive. It wants to bind to something. It wants to chemically react with something, and it's being blown into water. And if you have HO2 and you have N, you're going to get nitrate. You're going to get hydrogen peroxide. You're going to get nitrite. You're going to get all sorts of solutions. And nitrate is something that the plants can take up. So we can take air and turn it into nitrate. The only question is, how can we generate this energy? And that is really the sustainability aspect of it. Right now, as it is here, it's very expensive. But if we have renewable energy, if we have solar panels, if we have windmills, if we have other sources of energy, we can do this, and farmers can do this by themselves. This can be scaled up. One of the big problems with those big industrial nitrogen fertilization factories, they can't be scaled up and down. This can be modular, just like Lego. You can have multiple of them. Okay? So this is much more scalable, very flexible depending on the production size. And what we have demonstrated is with this nitrogen fertilization, and I'll show you a couple of examples of this, we can get faster. If we use this water, so this becomes like energized water. This is why we call it plasma activated water, because there's nitrate, because there's hydrogen peroxide and other precursors for hormone triggering in plant roots that do a lot of things that we still don't know enough about, and a lot of research is now going into this. If we take this water, we can make seeds germinate faster. We can get more uniform germination, which if we want to roboticize something, scale something up in an industrial size, this becomes very important. We can get faster plant growth. And we may be using it in pest management in a number of ways, and I will show you that. So here's an example of some tomato seeds that are growing much faster. So we can either give them distilled water, or we can give them different kinds of plasma activated water. So what I want to show you here is that we can activate the water too much. We can actually make it too reactive, like here, and then we can see we can actually kill the plants. So it can be too much. Just like you can give a plant too much fertilizer, you can also give the seed or the plant too strong a PAW. But if we find the right, if we fine tune it correctly, we can actually get very significant increase in development of these small seedlings. So these 3 plants were treated the same way, except that these ones were given PAW, and these are tomato plants. And this is just a time-lapse video, right? And you can see here that the ones that got PAW grew much faster and ended up growing much bigger. Now this is very important in industrial production. If you can get your plants grown faster, you spend less time in the greenhouse, you spend less man hours managing your plants, and you have less time to be exposed to pests. So it has a lot of advantages, and there's another very important aspect. When we talk about plant pathology, when we talk about arthropod pests, it's particularly the young plants that are receptive or susceptible. So if we can make the plants grow faster, we can get them out of that early stage when they're very susceptible. The older a plant is, the better it can tolerate a pest. So we want to get them out, get them grown as fast as possible. And here are some examples. Here are some pictures. So this is what happens. So you can see this is a little yellow, so this was probably under fertilized. But the only difference between these three was that so they were started out in a substrate that was very low on nutrients. This was we just kept giving this regular water, and these were given PAW, plasma activated water, and you can see that they grew much faster. You can see ornamental plants, we see the same effect. You can see strawberry, we get the same effect, okay? Now, so there's something about this PAW which is absolutely fascinating, and we are very, very interested in pursuing this further. This is something that I would really like to continue doing here, and I know that Professor D is already doing something in her lab, but this is something we want to expand on. But this is going to require that we work with the engineers. This is going to work, we're going to work with other people from other departments or institutes if we really want to scale this up. And here's something that I think is very, very interesting. If we take, and this has been published, so if we take tomato plants and we just water them with regular water, and we grow and we put spider mites on them, look what happens to the spider mites that we put on these plants, okay? They grow very, very fast. But if we put PAW on these plants, the spider mites don't like it. They don't grow as fast, okay? Now, plant protection is a lot about promoting biological control. So there's a very, very interesting connection here, which is if we can get slower growth, we're giving the opportunity for natural enemies to perform better. So if we irrigate with PAW, we can get stronger plants. They are less attractive to pests, and we can also increase the performance of biological control. So in an integrated approach, we can water them with PAW, and then we can release the natural enemies. And in that way, we can get much stronger, much better performance. So this is one way we can make biological control more interesting, more adoptable, more economically feasible and interesting to growers by doing it this way. This is particularly in greenhouse production, where we have very, very intense crop production, and where we have the opportunity to deliver PAW very efficiently. A very unique part of what we're doing is because we have established an incredible working relationship with Westside Transplant in Woodland. What I'm holding here is a commercial tray, and as you can see behind me, we have commercial production going on. This is to illustrate the effect of one of the PAW treatments right here. We have on this side here we have our control plants. So they have been imaged, they've been treated just like these ones. They were taken to Davis, they've been imaged and kept here all the time, only being brought back just like these ones. These ones were receiving one of our PAW treatments, and you can kind of see the difference in the size of the canopy. And I'm just going to pull a simple one up, so you can kind of see here what we're talking about. So you can kind of see the difference here. So the question then becomes, what does this difference mean as we transplant them out? How much faster are these going to grow? How much faster are they going to establish? How much more efficient are they going to be in taking up nutrients and grow? And ultimately, at the very end, how much bigger yields are these going to produce based on how they were treated as a transplant, based on what sort of treatments they were getting, what sort of PAW treatment they were getting when they were this small. So here you can see this is how irrigation is taking place. This is a place, they produce 20 million tomato plants every year, okay? 20 million tomato plants. And in California, look at this. These are football fields. They are like 5, 6 football fields of tomato plants being grown, okay? Every little plant like this is called a transplant, is being grown out. So if you have, and they plant them at about 20,000 per acre. So this is not hectare. I know the numbers are a little bit different, but you can get an idea of how many plants there are here, okay? And if we can grow them faster, then Westside Transplant, this company and others, can make a lot of money by growing them faster. They can get them through the production much faster. They are less exposed to pests and diseases, right? So there's a lot of advantages here by using PAW and actually using the irrigation delivery system that they already have. We are not expecting them to do anything that it wouldn't require additional adoption of technology. And Ning, Professor D has actually been part of this, okay? So we took those transplants that were treated when they were small, when they were babies, in the trays. They were then put out into field plots. And then we grew them for the entire season. And then we saw the effect of what does it mean? So when I was asking in that video, what does it mean? Well, we actually already have an idea of that. Look at this, okay? In our control plot, in the field plots, they were getting the same amount of fertilizer, the same amount of water, everything was the same, okay? But we were getting about 3 kilos per plant on the control plants, but we were getting close to 5 kilos of tomatoes from the ones with certain PAW treatments. So we can get much bigger yields simply by growing transplants that are stronger, bigger, have a better root system, so we still don't know all the intricate ways that this PAW is interacting with the plant, and it's going to be very fascinating to work with plant physiologists, with molecular people, lots of people, soil people, figuring out what is actually going on. But we are clearly seeing an effect, and we are repeating this right now and hoping to see the same results again. And in this process, we also developed technology because we had to deliver PAW to the individual plants. So my technician developed a robot. So this is another spin-off. This is another part of what we're doing. So even though we're in the entomology department, we're also looking into technologies. And this is something we're trying to commercialize. Because we need to deliver this. We need to demonstrate to growers. If they have a big system like the one you saw where I was doing on the video, of course this wouldn't work, but maybe on a small scale, somebody would be interested in this, and for research, this is certainly useful. So there are so many ways that PAW can help with biological control, with development of faster plants, can be used to develop technologies. So many ways this area as a solution area can help us. We can use it to make something very exciting and give students an opportunity to get a very relevant education. And now I want to switch to the other solution area that I was talking about. I'm going to talk about optical sensing of crops. And I'm going to start the story with this picture. It's taken a long time ago, so I look a little differently, but you can see here I am using I was able to borrow the medical equipment of my oldest daughter at the time. And you can see here I'm taking the blood pressure and the heart rate of a plant, right? I'm essentially, and I'm putting on a white coat, so I'm essentially a crop doctor, okay? And that's how I would like you to envision optical sensing, that we are trying to be crop doctors. We are trying to, in a very consistent but also very advanced way, we are looking at how plants reflect light. And then looking at the reflectance profiles and using that information as a way to figure out how the plant is doing. Is it healthy? Is it stressed? Kind of like with a thermometer, when we are taking the temperature. That's essentially what we're doing here. So when we can do this from a molecular standpoint, so a lot of people work in the molecular area, people look in the physiological area, people work with volatiles. There are many different ways you can study plants. I'm a crop doctor based squarely on optical sensing, on how they reflect light. Because we want to decode these reflectance signals. We want to look at what changes in this profile and how can we use that to make decisions. And I'm going to give you some examples of that here in a little bit, okay? And I'm basically saying that I will pitch to BAAFS that we can do very advanced arthropod pest stress detection. We can work with diseases. We can work with the crop breeders. We can look at the ones that work with salt stress or drought stress, so climate change. We can also, the companies that produce biostimulants such as PAW, but also other products, we can look at the effect, how the plants respond to these by using optical sensing, okay? And these are just some of the ways that this technology can be used. So it's a Lego block that can be combined with other Lego blocks, okay? It's something that is highly complementary. It is quantitative, it is sexy, it is in a technology that can be used to scale things up. So it really has a lot of potential. Now, I'm not the only one working on this. And anybody recognize where we are here? Does anybody know where this is? Does anybody have a clue where this is? It's actually happening about 100 meters from here. This is just, my sense of orientation is not very good, but I think it's just down there. It's just down there, right? Is it over there? That way, sorry. It's that way, okay. It's just down there. You have, one of the colleagues is actually having this, it's called a gantry system. So it's a rail system where cameras, so there's a very advanced camera moving here, okay? And they're doing that just down here, okay? So you're already doing it. Well, Wei helped me get up to the 12th floor on a building. So now you're looking at the same system. Now you can see where we are, right? Now you kind of have an idea. And here's the, so I was standing right here and taking that photo, right? So this is the, but let's go a little higher. Let's go here. I decided to buy a satellite image of this area. There it is. This is the area I just showed you. This I bought about a week ago, okay? You can buy satellite images. And I'm not saying what they're doing right now is not useful. I think it's incredibly useful, but it can be complemented with another kind of analysis. So I could, for the extraordinary price of $15, so I had to sell a kidney to be able to buy this, but I did. I thought it was worth it, okay? I bought an image of your backyard. I bought this area, okay? And it gives me information in 8 spectral bands. So this is multi-spectral data. And the spatial resolution is 62 centimeters. So each pixel is about this big, about the size of a tile on the floor, a little bit bigger, maybe. Okay? So it's not super high resolution, but it's for $15. I think it's pretty damn good. Okay? I think this is worth it. I also downloaded. I actually spent $45. I actually bought three images. I also bought one for the 17th. So these were, but this is just to give you an idea. So this was from June 8th, June 17th, and June 22nd. There were also images available. So I can get them very regularly, okay? These are available at around this price. So this is very cost effective. Now, these ones only had 4 bands, so it's not as good as this one. So the spectral resolution, the spatial resolution is how big the pixels are. The spectral resolution is how many spectral bands it has. Well, these ones only had 4. And it depends on which sensor you're buying from. It depends on also on cloud cover, because you do have clouds here. So some days you won't be able to get the data just because there's too much cloud. So it's not as flexible as the system you have running out there right now. But for $15, and if I can get once every month, that would actually be good for many, many applications. And it allows you to scale up. It allows you to do so many things, because you can also go back in time. You actually have a time machine. If you start seeing something, you can go back in time. With this system, they can't go back in time. We can. We have a time machine. And we can compare, we can get data from anywhere else in the world. Anywhere else in the world, okay? So what did I do? You can even order from some of these satellite companies. You can even order them and have it set up so that you get every month, you get images taken for you. That's gonna cost some more money. That's not $15 anymore, but it's doable. So it depends on how important this is. And this will also enable you to get much higher spatial resolution than you otherwise would, okay? So I took this, so now we're zooming in. This is the area where so you can see the gantry, you can see the rails here. I got rid of the background, so I did some what's called masking or removing the background, so I got rid of that. So I ended up, so this was actually about 8,000 pixels here. Now I'm down to about 3,000 pixels. I then did some analysis of this, okay? And I have no idea what they were growing. June 8th, I have no idea what was going on. I don't know what treatments they were or anything. So all I could do was what's called an unsupervised classification. I basically just told the computer, put this into 5 classes for me. Just look at whatever you can give me, just to give me a sense of what was going on. So it's just generating it, turning it into 5 classes. And there's actually some interesting patterns that we don't need to talk about. The point is not that what these classes specifically mean. The point is we can do it. And it was very quick, and it cost very, very little, and it's very, very scalable, right? So, and the classes were not equally abundant. So some classes were more abundant than others. What does this mean? These are the scientific questions that, had we been there at the time, had we collected data on the soil, had we actually collected some leaves and done some analysis, if we knew which varieties were planted where, whatever was going on, we could start informing them. So instead of doing unsupervised, we could start doing supervised classification. And that is really what I'm gonna be pitching that we do, because this is what society wants from us. They want apps, they want solutions, they want decision support tools. But for that, we need to combine what I just showed you with a whole bunch of experimental research, where we set up plots that are big enough for us to pick them up on the satellite images. We need to have different treatments, we need to have different controls, we need to set this up properly so that we can take this analysis, these data, and put some meaning into these colors and actually force the classifications, the machine learning algorithms that we're using, have them to try to detect what precisely we're looking for. And then suddenly we have something that industry is interested in, something that computer science students can help us with. This becomes money, this becomes very, very valuable to the fertilizer companies, to the breeding companies, to the government, to many, many parts of society. We are making ourselves relevant, okay? So let me show you another, so this is now I'm changing hat. Now I'm going to spectral analytics, okay? Because this is what we do a lot of in spectral analytics, okay, in my company. And here you're looking at walnut orchard in California. And we're looking for spider mite infestations, okay? So this is actually a walnut orchard. It's hard to see here, but it's a it's a square. You can see it's fairly big. It's a big contiguous area full of walnuts. And what we have convinced some growers and some funders to do is, we think we can precision deliver predatory mites to control spider mites by analyzing these maps. So what they want to do is they want to use drones to release predatory mites. And we say, well, That's great. It's very expensive, and it's going to take a lot of mites if you want to cover all of these 40 acres. So that's about 15 hectares or something. That's going to take a lot of predatory mites. What if we could map them out? So what we did was some analysis, and we actually finding that the edges appear to be more infested than so maybe you can leave the middle alone. Maybe you can just have the drone fly along the edges, and you will get the same effect. So you can use a higher density of spider mites, predatory mites at the same price. So there's a way here to optimize the use of biological control, again making it economically more feasible and getting much better results. Because if you spread a very low density of predatory mites over an area like this, it's very likely that it's not going to work. And then the growers are going to say it didn't work. Well, it's not that it didn't work, it's just the application was not right. So we are working on development of drones that can release predatory mites. This drone over here is actually spraying pesticides, but it could be also this hopper right here, this big one underneath, could be releasing predatory mites. Okay, so this is something where we work with engineers, and you can see that powder and vermiculite is being dropped out of the. So this is something we are very, very interested in developing. So this is again highly engineering. Control of this. How does this work under different wind conditions? How fast does it need to go? Because how does this perform as it gets released? What are the fluid mechanics of the airstream underneath the flying drone? How will this be dispersed with the downdraft of the drone? Something we are very, very interested in, okay? But we need engineers and smart mathematicians to help us develop that. That's not entomology, but it kind of is. And it's definitely pest management if we can come up with a solution. So then I want to move to another project that we are doing. So this is something funded by the Gates Foundation and the Royal Courts of the UAE. So about 10 days ago, I was in the United Arab Emirates. I was at the Hormuz Street, actually, because spectral analytics is part of a big consortium working on the red palm weevil. So dates you can see here are being produced, and this is the red palm weevil. It's a big larva that drills into the palm trees and eat them from the inside. Okay, and they kill the palms. So we need to come up with a way to control them. And I just want to point out that it was kind of hot. Okay. It was 51°C when we were out working in the field, okay? So these are different conditions, and this is one of the reasons why you don't want to spend that much time out in the field. If you could, from the sky, if you could use satellite image to figure out which palms are being infested, and early on, maybe you could do something about it. Because once those larvae are inside the trunk, there's very little you can do. So, but to start this whole process, to train our algorithm to look for infested trees, what we are doing is we are using a listening device. So there's actually a little probe that he's taking out here that he put into the tree, and it can sense the sound of a chewing insect. And you can see, oh, this one was detected. This one was positive, okay? And because it also has GPS coordinates, we can actually get maps. So these are the palms, and we can see where we get positives, where we get negatives, okay? And once we have that, we can associate it with our satellite imagery, and then we can start running supervised classification, and then we can develop maps. So this is one of the big orchards where I spent a lot of time in 51-degree weather here. So we were playing a lot around over here, okay? So this is a high-resolution satellite imagery, and you can see the individual palm trees. You can also see that some of them have been replanted. This is actually where the red palm weevil was so bad that they took out all the palm trees, and then they have to start all over. Costs a lot of money to get rid of the palms and then get new ones and then wait 6-8 years before they start producing again. So it's very, very costly for them, okay? So can we, in this ocean of date palms, can we find the ones that are infested? Can we use that radiometric data from the palms to actually find the ones that are infested and help them manage them better that way. So that's what spectral analytics, what we're doing here. So based on some initial analysis, so this is the same one, we've done some classification and we are now doing some validation of this. We're trying to figure out and perfecting this. So this is what we're doing. I want to show another type of satellite imagery, and this is what's called ultra high. So this is a different project. This is actually back to our tomato. This is our PAW. Now look at this. This is ultra high spatial resolution, 7 centimeters. Now the pixels are not 62 centimeters, they're 7. Okay? To give you, I mean, look at that. You can almost read what is on these boards. Okay, this is not taken with a drone. This is an image taken with a satellite. There is commercially available 7 centimeter spatial resolution satellite imagery that people like me can buy with no military clearance, anything that we can buy. This is an incredible opportunity. So we are using this. So this is that tomato plot that I showed you earlier was actually taken from here. This is the one, okay? So this is the same as this one, but here we have the actual image. We can go in here because it's such a high resolution. We know where we are because this is geo-rectified and we know which treatments we have where, so we can go in and collect our pixels and we can actually associate yields with these pixels. So this suddenly becomes very, very powerful. Lots of things we can do here. So, is this perfect? No. Does it have challenges? Absolutely. And this is where the research comes in. And I will argue that for optical sensing in crop, for this to become truly adoptable, for this to become something that we can use in crop management, there are 2 areas that I am publishing on, the 2 areas that I would like to work with students in the future. This is where we are now coming back to the students and what the purpose of higher education is going to be. And this is where you should potentially look at your careers and see whether this is something you're interested in. So there's an area called radiometric calibration. I will talk quickly about what that is, and also the performance of our classification functions. Those supervised classification functions that I'm talking about, how can we make them useful? How can we make them robust? How can we make them sensitive? So here you see, so this is again our tomato fields. You can see that we have put out some colored boards here, and you will see a drone coming in here in a little bit. So this is my technician, Anil. He is using a drone to film a drone, right? So there's one drone flying over the other drone. So up here's another drone filming this drone, right? So this is now collecting data. And what we are basically, so there's Anil running 2 drones at a time. You can imagine he's pretty smart, okay? And Ning knows this. So you can see he's now flying a flight path here, but the drone actually flew over these colored boards first. And one of the reasons why is because radiometric, for us to study the radiometric calibration, we should, in the ideal world, we should be able to fly over the same colored boards and every time get the same reflectance profile. But we are not, because the sun is changing, because the atmosphere is changing, because the temperature is changing. So we need to correct for that. So radiometric calibration is how do you correct that signal so that you're getting constant data over time. So we published a paper a couple of years ago, Anil and I and my former student. And basically, Anil flew a whole bunch of missions on 3 different days. So and exactly over these colored boards. And you can see here what this should show us, this red line shows that we could only get about if we did no calibration whatsoever, we could only get about 94% accuracy or consistency over time. What that means is that there's 6% error. And that means that if the subtle stress, to put that in plant or crop protection context, if you have 94% consistency, that means that if the stress signal from a plant is, say, 5%, it is still within the margin of the 6%. It is still within the margin of noise where we can't pick it up. You would need a stronger stress response in order to pick it up. So we want this to be as high as possible so that the difference up to 0, up to 100 is as small as possible. So we were able to, with our advanced calibration, we were able to get very, very high, and particularly out here in the near infrared, we were able to add value to some higher bands. So this is something where people who are much smarter than me would be able to develop something that would be even better. And this is a big part of what we need to do, is we need to improve our radiometric calibration. The other part that I want to talk about is the performance and validation. So this is something else we have published on. And basically, what the problem is that when we develop a classification function, it needs to work when we apply it to a new data set. It needs to work when we go to another field or when we go to the same field the next year. So this is what a lot of papers are being published without what this crucial step, which is called independent validation. And we need to make the classification functions strong enough so that they are robust, they can detect what we want to detect, but also so that they work when they are being applied somewhere else. And we can do a whole bunch of stuff inside. We can do experimental imaging, not just with drones, not just with satellite imagery. We can also do, and Ning has done some of this with her work, we can do hyperspectral imaging inside. And one of the cool things about this is that we are using artificial lighting. So this won't allow us to go to a large scale, but it allows us as easily. But it will allow us to get very, very detailed data. And we use this to answer a question that we found out, to our surprise, had never been answered in the literature, which basically is, when should you collect your imaging data from a crop? And should it be at night or during the day? Does it matter? Is there a difference? And it actually turns out there's a huge difference, because plants are alive. And plants have photophase during the day and they have scotophase at night. So they respirate at night and they perform photosynthesis during the day. So when you look at the reflectance profile, those curves that I showed earlier, if you divide night with day, you can see that, so night 1, a line of 1 would mean that there's no difference. But you can actually see that there's a 6% increase at night in certain bands, and there are some bands that are lower. This makes perfect sense. I will not go into the physiology behind this, but this makes a ton of sense. Okay? But there's a stronger response. What we demonstrated in that paper, which was even more important, was if you look at the red ones, this is the difference between control and treated plants during the day, and the blue one is between control and infested plants. The same plants, but imaged at night. Look at the height. Look at how much stronger the response, the blue was, how far it was from 1. 1 would mean that they're the same. You can see out here, we're not seeing any difference in these spectral bands. So in the near infrared, there's not a lot going on. But here, in the red and in the green light, we are seeing a very, very strong response, especially at night, while during the day there's nothing. So we are basically, from this study, we are proposing, if you're using artificial lighting, if you have the possibility, you should be imaging at night, which is also a huge advantage, because if you're working in greenhouses, nobody's there. You can control the light, so you don't have to do that radiometric calibration that I just talked about, because you don't have changes in light. You're controlling the light. So it has a lot of practical implications. So, concluding remarks. How's agronomy, or crop production more generally, how is it going to look like in the 21st century? Well, the things that really matter, what society wants us to work with, is solutions that head-on address urbanization, climate change, and sustainability more broadly. Right? We have to build that into every step we take on campus, everything we do here. Okay? Society will expect us to develop solutions. We have the tools. It is so much easier today with all the technologies and the internet and yeah, 3D printing, you name it, so many AI we can do and high performance computers. We are capable of doing that. We shouldn't just be learning, we should be turning it into actions, into solutions, into products. And we definitely need to look at how we can combine in clever ways ecology, agronomy, broadly speaking, so crop breeding, crop production, entomology, you name it, pathology, engineering and computer science, how we can build all of this together. Okay? Industry partners and entrepreneurship need to be part of the solution. And this picture, of course, was taken just up here, right? What I find very interesting is what's right here? What's on the other side of this, out of this wall? Because in my view, this is very pretty, but this is much better. But it's much smaller. I would like whoever is the big boss here to put this out there. Because to me, domestically leading and globally renowned, that should be right there in the front, okay? I think the two signs should be, we shouldn't be putting this in the back. We should be putting that out there, okay? Wrong place, guys. Okay? So, being a leader and becoming renowned, what does that mean? That means having a structure and workforce that is multidisciplinary and can collaborate. What can administrators do to make it, to facilitate collaboration? What grants, what monetary incentives, how can teaching be integrated? How can we create new ways of people working together? How can we really address the real issues? How can we tie that to what we're doing? The names of the institutes, the missions of the institutes should be tied to those issues that I just listed. Truly prioritize international collaboration, not just focus on China, but really bring in talent from somewhere else and recruit the young people and have them learn languages, not just English and Chinese, but other languages too, Spanish, right? French, other major languages, right? And really try to become leaders and what I refer to as disruptors. So the people that change the future, change the world, right? These are disruptors. That should be goals.